All right, welcome back. You're still watching Kenya's Choice on the 6th day of September 2022. And it's time that I want us now to focus on what next, because the Supreme Court has decided. Well, it began with Kenyans deciding. IEBC made the announcement or declaration. Then the Supreme Court has decided, and obviously now it is clear where we are headed. President-elect William Ruto will become President William Ruto on the 13th of September 2022 by 2 p.m., by which time he must have been sworn in and taken the oath of office. Of course, two of them that are obviously contained in the Constitution, and so will Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua, who will become Deputy President on that very day. I'm in studio with the three gentlemen that I want to introduce now. That is Paul Macharia, who is an advocate. I also have Dan Okach, who is also an advocate, and I have Suba Churchill from the National Civil Society Center. They are here to take us through the next steps and, of course, what the country has been through the past several months, or is it years, of campaigning, and now get into this position that a transition has to happen from President Kenyatta to President Ruto. Let's start by looking at what the assumption of office looks like. We have some slides that you will see. The leadership of that should be by Joseph Kinyua, who is the acting secretary to the cabinet. He's also the chairperson of the National Security Advisory Council, but he's in that assumption of office committee in his capacity as secretary to the cabinet. The other personalities that you see there are members, including Attorney General Paul Kihara Kariuki, CS of Interior, but responsible for immigration duties, that is Fred Matiang'i, Security PS, that is Karanja Kibicho, Julius Muya from the National Treasury, Macharia Kamau, PS Foreign Affairs. You have Jerome Ochieng from ICT. You have Robert Kibochi, who is the Chief of Defense Forces. Philip Kameru from the NIS. One Hilary Mutiambai from the Inspector, he's the Inspector General, rather. Of course, Cynthia Mbugua, who is the Controller of State House. And Amadi from the Judiciary. She's the Chief Registrar there. You have one of the clerks from the Houses of Parliament. You have three representatives of William Ruto, whom he picked, and that is Gladys Boss, Veronica Maina, and Justin Muturi. Of course, Gladys Boss is the woman representative for us in Gishu, where DP Ruto comes from. Veronica Maina is the Secretary General of UDA, and Justin Muturi is the outgoing speaker, but also working with Kenya Kwanza. They have certain functions that they're supposed to be doing during this time, and of course, this has been going on since it became apparent that there was going to be a president-elect. Their work is to facilitate the handing over process, to ensure security of the president-elect and, of course, the deputy president-elect, to organize facilities and personnel for president-elect, coordinate briefings of president-elect. Of course, you had yesterday William Ruto saying that he has been meeting and will be meeting certain government officials as he prepares for the next course of action. Then also, the committee has to facilitate communication between President Kenyatta and the president-elect, in this case, William Ruto. So it is the work of that committee to facilitate that. And of course, we've been listening to both leaders, including William Ruto and, William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta. And let me start by getting a feel of what your take is. Let me begin with you, Suba. Your take after now. This is over, it appears, between 9th of August and yesterday. The country now has a clear verdict, and what should follow? What's your take?
Yeah, I think what should follow, of course, is provided for in the relevant laws and the Constitution. President-elect is supposed to be sworn in within 7 days, and counting from yesterday, it means that come Tuesday next week, a ceremony will be organized at which the assumption of office committee will ensure that there is that transition. We are happy that the outgoing president did indicate yesterday, and it's not the first time he did so, that he will facilitate a smooth transition as the outgoing commander-in-chief. You know, the ceremony is quite elaborate. There are certain instruments that come with the transition, and as the outgoing commander-in-chief, he'll be there to hand over some of those instruments, including those that relate to his position as the commander-in-chief. We, as Kenyans, mostly remember the sword. That is the symbol of authority for as commander-in-chief. Mm-hmm. And so we are on track And as a country, I think, going by the reactions that we saw yesterday, I think our democracy is maturing, Kenyans are maturing gradually, and whether anyone was pleased or unhappy with the outcome of the verdict of the Supreme Court, we saw for the first time a very, very, mature, responsible, calm, and composed citizenry. And that is what we want to see moving forward. We saw the reaction of those who had petitioned the Supreme Court.
Right.
Yes, they said they did not agree with it, but said they would accept it. And I think that also contributed immensely in calming any nerves that may have been agitated by the outcome of the elections. Yeah, so I think that for me is the way forward. We of course also saw the outgoing president, disagreeing a bit with the outcome of the petition, and of course, trying to encourage Kenyans to keep institutions, including the judiciary, to account within the spirit of Article 10 and many other within the public service chapter in the Constitution. And so that, for me, is the spirit with which we should help to grow our institutions as established in the Constitution. And for me, continued vigilance as a civil society actor remains key. We saw, of course, the incoming president-elect also make his speech and address his supporters at his current residence in his capacity as the deputy president. And basically saying and reassuring that he's not going to be vindictive,
I think
that he's going to move us forward.
I think he spoke in his capacity as president-elect.
As president-elect, yes. Yes, of course, that's the capacity in which he spoke.
Yeah.
And for me, as a human rights activist, I think the reassurance that is going to ensure that Kenyans enjoy their freedom, that freedom has come. Previously, we have been a bit skeptical. When you are being promised freedom by people who have had no history of fighting for it, you get a bit skeptical whether really they have the capacity to bring it. But we hope that moving forward and from when he will take charge, we will be guaranteed the freedom. There'll be no, enforced disappearances, and I think even during his campaign he said as much, especially when he went to northern Kenya where...
So, but we'll get to that in regards to what awaits him in office, and we'll also be listening to President... Actually, let's just listen to President Uhuru Kenyatta as he speaks about the transition.
The process of handing over is in progress through the Assumption of Office Committee, which actually has already begun its work as of August 10th, 2022. And indeed, it is my intention to oversee a smooth transition to the next administration, and all the necessary orders to facilitate this process have already been issued.
All right, relevant orders to facilitate that have already been issued. But Dan, when you reflect on what you've been through the past, is it 3 weeks? Actually, almost 4 now, since it's exactly 4. Yeah. You had to count up to yesterday. What then are we to pick as we move forward after that grueling campaign into what it's been since 9th of August?
Yes, I think if I focus mostly on the speech of the president-elect, I think that is where Kenyans should start from as a starting point, because a president and our constitution is a unifying factor for everyone, and the president is a president to everyone. In fact, you can't choose that I want to be a president to this particular class of people, this particular group of people, or this particular people who voted for me in terms of a political class. You are a president for everyone. And I'm so happy that the president-elect started from that particular aspect, giving assurance to the entire country that for him, it is about Kenya and not about a section, not even about the people who literally, you know, sweated for him alone. He said, I will be a president for everyone. And even extended, you know, extended a hand to his main rival and indicated they'll still work together. Of course, he has been very clear that the sense of working together is not in the handshake kind of it, but is within the framework of the Constitution, whereby he knows very well that his government will still need the checks and balances provided in the Constitution, and that the Constitution has created a role for every person in this particular political space, which must be played for us to now have a working environment, a working engine called a government. So to that extent, and I want to believe that that cooled a lot of nerves, using the words of Suba Churchill, because people want to feel that the regime that is coming in, or the regime that is there, is for all of us. And I think that's the biggest message and the most important message that the president-elect has given. And not even now. The moment he was declared the president-elect on the 15th of last month, that was still the message that he gave. And I would want to juxtapose it with the current president in terms of the speech yesterday, because I think there is a disconnect around there, because going forward, we want to foster unity. We want to say that elections should be a season. Once it is done, we go back to nation building. We have our ways of solving electoral disputes. The moment they are employed and the moment they give us an outcome, we then must rest it at that point and say that there is an end to even litigation at this point, so that we do not then try to say that there is some unfinished business. In terms of what I had the current president indicate, in terms of trying to castigate the process and all that, those we will leave for people to write books, to write theses about that. But in terms of the electoral process, it is good to tell Kenyans we are past that. Let's wait for 2027. We will again have another chance, whoever wants to vie for whichever position you'll have. But in the meantime, Obama told us you must support your president. It doesn't matter whether you voted for him, whether you did not vote for him. As a patriot, as a person who is genuine, you must want your president to succeed, because the success of your president will translate to the success of the nation and gradually your success as an individual. But if you want to pray that your president does not succeed, because we always say these presidents are chosen by God, if you are your prayer is that you have so much beef or you don't like this president, that your prayer is he doesn't succeed, you're actually praying for yourself not to succeed. And that's where Kenyans, and I think we are up to that. With what happened yesterday, Sam, you'll notice that Kenyans have matured. And they know that at this particular point, it is not a matter of life and death. And I thank God also for the aspect of county government devolution, because we also have a lot of focus. So no one will even say that the president is the sole determinant of the money that will come to my region or to my area, because we already have the devolved functions which are already there. You have also been empowered to elect your own leaders at the grassroots level, where we have those small governments. So as much as we have, that's why I still come back to where I started. The president is the father figure. He's actually the one who will give us, who will steer the country, but we also have other people we have empowered. So you cannot just say that it is all about one center. We have already also devolved this aspect of leadership.
Okay, before I get to you, Paul, let's listen to what the president-elect said about reaching out to President Kenyatta.
Shortly be putting a call to my good friend, President Uhuru Kenyatta. We have not we have not I haven't talked to him in months. But shortly I will be putting a call to him so that we can have a conversation on the process of transition.
Okay, all right. Of course, we know what the campaign was like. And Paul, as you reflect on these events, what do you think is that thing that the country must focus on, whether it's in the political class or the citizens, especially in the next 7 days?
I think one of the things that Kenyans have to embrace is the change of regime. It is inevitable that in a democratic state, those things ought to happen. It is one of the things that Kenyans should expect. So to those who are part of the team that won, good riddance to them. To those who were on the part that did not win, it is time to take their role, because in a democratic state, every party is pertinent and every party is important in ensuring that the running of the institutions, because in a sovereign state like Kenya, we have institutions, we have judiciary, we have executive, and then we have the legislature. All those avenues, and also we have courts, which are very important. All those avenues are there to ensure that, one, the constitution is upheld, no matter which divide or no matter which regime is in position. Two, to ensure that there is peace and there is a smooth running of the social aspect of life and also the economic aspect of life. So I think what Kenyans should expect is that let's embrace peace. That is the utmost thing for us to be able to forge forward. And of course, Kenya belongs to us all. No matter which side you voted for, Kenya belongs to us all. These leaders will come and go. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if we allow our country to be put in wrangles by the leaders we put in position, it will one time come to haunt us. So it is big time and big chance for us Kenyans to reflect on the best way forward to cope with this regime. Of course, ultimately, the government is supposed to serve the people, because it is us, the people, who voted in the government. It is the government to serve us. So it is us to be vigilant. As the president said, let us be vigilant in courts, in the checkouts for the institutions' operations, and also in all the avenues where there is any discrepancy in terms of what the law provides and what the role of individual leaders is. Let them not shy away from calling them out to take up their role as leaders, because when they are elected as leaders, their original position, political position changes. For example, the president is a symbol of national unity. We do not expect the president to discriminate those who did not vote for him. He's supposed to unify all the Kenyans, whether you voted for him or whether you did not vote for him. Same applies to the other leaders. So we expect them to not to be so vindictive, not to hunt those who maybe uttered a word against them. Political difference we can't be all speaking the same political voice. Mm-hmm. It's allowed, our constitution allows us to have a different view, that the view should not divide us to an extent that we can't face each other to discuss agenda that will propel this country forward. So it's a big time for us to reflect on the best way forward we can achieve the goals that this constitution sets out for us. Okay, and let me get back to you, Dan, just a little bit, because when you look at the decision of the Supreme Court, it's not often the past few years that you've seen a unanimous decision of that bench, but also other benches of the superior courts. What do you think? Is it a question of that's where all the evidence was directing them to, or is it a strategy that the court could have taken?
I think both the suggestions you've made will still come in handy. One is that, one of the major issues or the major questions before the Supreme Court was the fact that it was dealing with a divided IBC, which is a constitutional body. So to that particular extent, the voice of the Supreme Court ought to correct that, and I think it would have just worked to the contrary if you would have had a verdict where the same verdict has a divided support in terms of the Supreme Court judges, the 7 of them. So it will be sending just the same message. And I think that may have worked quite or played a very major role to also signify that some of these institutions ought to speak in one voice and they're expected to speak in one voice. Ideally for the courts, I think courts are the only ones that are allowed, you know, when you have a bench, it is allowed that you can have a dissenting decision, ruling or judgment. And the reasons are given for that. But, you know, for IEBC, you do not expect some commissioners to have their own declaration numbers and others to have their own declaration and numbers. It will signify a very bad thing. And you had the words of Justice Mwilu, the DCJ, and even the CJ herself at the close of the hearings. And that was a major message. And I think that may have ended in this. Of course, lawyers will tell you it is very, very rare for you to find, you know, even a bench of 3 agreeing. It's not the norm. Of course, they can. It has happened. But now when you have 7 legal minds, even me and my colleague here, if you give us 3 questions, one of them, chances are high we will disagree. But I think also to signify, you know, that, or to justify that, you look at all these grounds, and there's very proper reasoning around the grounds. And in my view, or anyone looking at it objectively, will say that it wasn't so hard for this court to actually find, or for any judge whatsoever, faced with the same allegations, the evidence that was provided, to arrive at a finding that none of these grounds actually met the threshold required. Remember, and I've said it in this show before, nullifying an election should not be a very easy thing. In fact, we should start from always the preposition that the elections were conducted in a proper way. So the burden of proof always is on you who alleges. So it makes it very hard, because remember, the people have already expressed their will. But for you to nullify, you must have very cogent, very express, and very direct evidence to convince a judge. Without that, the burden is then not on IEBC or the person who has been declared a winner. And that will translate not only for the presidential aspect, but any other seat, even the MCA, because we still have petitions which courts will be dealing with. So for you to do this, you must also know that it will have brought a very heavy cost with it. Of course, there will also be, of course, the uncertainty that comes with it. So you must demonstrate to this court beyond, you know, beyond the threshold that is required, so that they are convinced. So ideally, if you look at these grounds, and even the way they were framed, in terms of the grounds that they framed, of course, you find that there was a problem with the petition. It was not circumspect in terms of the issues. So, and the wordings of the court, you can see they were not so kind as usual. Courts always are very kind with their words. But when you see courts come out and use certain words, they are telling you something. And they're saying in future, don't just petition for the sake of petitioning. When you believe in your case, come to court. If you don't believe in your case, of course, people are lucky in these petitions, there are no costs. But, you know, ordinarily, if you take a hopeless case to court, the cost must always apply, because it's also the taxpayers who are footing that cost. Putting those Supreme Court judges for those number of days in that particular setting was a cost to the taxpayer. So there is a lot to look at. Okay. But as I finish, just one issue, which I don't know if we'll go back. From the word go, you asked us, and I want to say that in these coming weeks, we must focus on IEBC. We want to know what will happen, because the 7 days are critical, because IEBC has a continuous role. So we want to know whether there will still be unity within the commission. That's something we are looking out for. The issue of magnanimity in terms of those who have won and those who have lost. It is a very key issue, because the people who have won have a right to celebrate. Even on Tuesday, they have a right to celebrate. But at the end of the day, it must be a bit measured in a way that you don't taunt a person who has lost, because Kenya has won at the end of the day. And most importantly is the relationship between the current president and the president-elect, it's very important because I said it in this show when I was against the conduct of the current president as against the president-elect, who was the deputy president then, that if that continues and it is God's will that this person who is being vilified is elected, the show that will happen on Tuesday will be a replica of what happened when Daniel Toroitich arap Moi was handing over power to Mwai Kibaki, which is not a very good thing. We do not want a president to go there and he's cajoled and they shout, and chances are high that may be the sense. So I think within the next days, that is something that I think the president-elect should try to ensure that whoever will come for that ceremony, we should try to do things a bit differently. Of course, naturally people were not happy with some of the actions of the current president, but in terms of what will be seen by the entire globe, it is important for us not to show some bad manners, okay, or something that will depict we are still vengeful or we are not happy.
Okay, I hear you. But let's focus on, because, of course, probably the harder part, or part of the hard part is over now, because we're running the campaigns and now there's a president-elect. But after Tuesday, he has now to execute what he promised to the country, but also, more importantly, based on the functions of a president. And part of that will have to entail him appointing a team. It's cabinet, principal secretaries, parastatal chiefs, of course, with so many promises made to different political personalities, but also the heavy expectation that people have, including the main concerns. What do you think for you must be some of the very important areas that the president-elect must focus on after Tuesday next week?
Yes, I think even the questions came up as late as yesterday. After he made his speech, of course, he invited the media to raise any questions, a few questions they may have had. And the all-important question is, what do you intend to do in the first 100 days? The president-elect did promise to make more substantive, statement during his swearing in. But if you asked me, and because Kenyans are hurting out there, the cost of living, for me, is paramount. We have all these subsidies that are either almost lapsing, and therefore need to be, Kenyans need clarity as to whether the subsidy on the cost of oil, because that has a bearing on the cost of living, production of food, the cost of fertilizer for those who are, crop farmers, and generally, the drought situation. The weathermen have said we should prepare for a longer dry spell, and that for, pastoralists in the northern parts of the country and parts of North Rift is a big issue. And then, of course, the young people who the president-elect seem to have inspired a lot of hope on, in terms of, giving them hope that, if they entrust him with the leadership of the country, as indeed they have done, that he will be, coming to their rescue. He did actually indicate yesterday that he will be moving ahead to establish...
It's not as if you know the generational spread of who voted for who.
Yeah, I mean, we know the generational spread from the opinion polling. Of course, we have issues with opinion polls, but from when, before the elections, before the balloting, every opinion poll indicated that most of the younger generation tended to lean towards Kenya Kwanza. The slightly older people tended to lean towards Azimio. And we want to believe that that is the pattern in which, of course, voting is a secret thing. It is individual, and we all go to the ballot box as individuals. But based on the opinion polling, successive ones did indicate, because there is a way in which, they attempted to dissect the figures and really pinpoint which direction most of the young people were likely to vote. And of course, Wajakoya, despite not performing very well, also had quite a bit of attraction to young people because of his policies and stuff. So, but whether the young people voted for the president-elect or not, as Mr. Okach has indicated, he's now the President of the Republic of Kenya for the old and the young. And all those generations are hurting in terms of cost of living. So Kenyans expect him to prioritize, measures that will ensure that, the cost of living is brought down. It's a very difficult moment because, but being an experienced leader, is the outgoing deputy president and incoming president, and therefore has been part of this government, he really knows where, he can tinker to ensure that, Kenyans get a breather from the pressures of, the economic pressures they go through. So I think that for me is key. Of course, as like any other new leader, he will be making appointments. The appointments, Kenya should not expect him to, announce all the appointments at one go. They'll come in layers. Of course, first eyes will be on who sits in the 20-member cabinet. Is it 2021?
Maximum.
Around 22, yes, around that number. And remember, he promised that half of that cabinet will be not more than half will be of the same gender. So we are looking forward to seeing the faces of the men and women, the equal number of men and women that will be sitting in that cabinet. The cabinet as a way of either inspiring or dispiriting the voters. So Kenyans, just by looking at the people that will be appointed, with either say, yes, there is a chance that these people can help the president-elect to deliver. So that is what we expect. And of course, after that, there'll be ambassadorial, parastatal, but we do not, of course, expect the president-elect, to make such major pronouncements. And of course, there are all these, heads of security. Some are appointed on fixed terms. Some, he may have to wait because it's a transition process for their terms to lapse, so that he's not seen to be, victimizing. Of course, we also know that even the names that you displayed here as sitting in the Assumption Committee, some of them were not the best friends of the incoming president. But of course, in his magnanimity, because he'll be now in charge, we do not expect that, he will announce that it is under now new management. Can everybody vacate? There is a manner in which, such transitions happen. The handing over ceremonies, we'll be seeing, of course, people going with the trucks and pickups and whatever they may need to carry their, truckloads of stuff, personal belongings from offices and so on. And that will occupy us for the next couple of days as we watch to see the new team that will be in town.
Okay, that's interesting perspectives. But for you, Paul, I mean, we've seen different cabinets. I mean, before 2010, it was a cabinet of politicians. In 2013, we saw an attempt to have technocrats or professionals or experts form the larger part of the cabinet. Come 2017, there was a mix-up, more politicians than before. What for you constitutes a good cabinet that can deliver on both promises on the campaign trail, but also execute the mandate of these offices as per the law?
So according to me, I think every regime has its own priorities, the key areas of focus. And of course, every person, once the appointive offices have been appointed, individuals to the appointive offices have been appointed, they'll be vetted and approved by the parliament. So of course we expect somebody who has a track record in the public service, because they'll be serving the people of Kenya. We expect them, people who have, those positions, being in the executive, it's the role to implement public, the policies of the government, implementing the laws. So we expect the individuals to be in those positions. One, they should have requisite experience in their areas of focus. Two, they should be the statesmen or state women we can have confidence in terms of executing of their duties. And three, they should be people who can inspire even confidence with the people who will be serving under them. Not people who have a track record of maybe being vindictive or taking or not having not implementing Article 10 of the Constitution. No, Article 10 of the Constitution changed the regime of operations for those in power. One of the key areas or the key theme that is highly put forward is the public participation and also the inclusivity of all the key areas. So we expect the people to be in charge of those offices, should the people who, one, can inspire confidence to the whole country in the sphere of their work. Two, the people who have a record of implementing constitution, particularly public participation. We do not expect leaders or cabinet secretaries who will be working on their own without involving the people who are under them. So we expect, of course, during the vetting, that's when the checks and balances are. And as the president said, it is the high time that every person plays their role in ensuring that we get effective persons in office. An effective person is the person who can deliver on the role given to them. If it is heading a ministry, you should have at least requisite understanding on how that ministry is run. Two, you should be a person who can work with others, because these positions you can't work alone. You need people. And how can we be able to understand that you need people? In your previous places of work, have you involved people in terms of public participation? Are you a person who is accountable? Do you conform to the provisions of Chapter 6 of the Constitution? So we expect people who will inspire confidence, one, to the people who were on their team and to the people who were on the other team.
Okay.
Yes.
And Dan, because in this election, there are people that have lost. There are several political leaders who are not seeking any election, and they are working with President-elect William Ruto on the campaign trail. And so they also have expectations. Is it, for you, what is that balancing act so that you have the politicians versus experts who can deliver? But also, one of the key issues during this time of Uhuru Kenyatta has been that some of the cabinet secretaries are aloof. They are not political savvy, so they do not connect with the challenges and issues of the people. How does William Ruto get that right?
Yeah, Sam, you know, the Constitution is very clear. When we gave it upon ourselves, we indicated that we do not want to have politicians now doubling up as, cabinet secretaries. And there was a very good reason for that. Ideally, the aspect was to ensure professionalism, and the issues that we have been complaining about, or people have been complaining about, that we have people using their offices and the resources to support a certain side of the political divide would have been a thing in the past. Of course, the president-elect now and the current president negated that immediately they were elected in 2013 by actually deciding to, at that particular point, to bring in some people. At that point, I think it was Governor Ngilu, Najib Balala, and the rest. So that was a point where there was a watershed at that particular point. But ideally, going forward, we've seen the essence of professionalism. At this point, of course, the Deputy President have already had him saying that he would want to empower Parliament in a way that his CSAs will still be answerable in a way to Parliament. And I think then that should mean that whoever is appointed should be purely professional, especially in terms of the CS position, so that when you go there, you are not just mingling with your peers in terms of politics, but you are going there as a professional. Ideally, if you look at it, and in terms of these, his pronouncements, the President-elect has said he will want a professional civil service, and no one should think the civil service will actually do, or the provincial administration will do any political bidding for them, which is a very good thing going forward. However, of course, he has to balance and reward the people who worked with him, because he didn't achieve it alone. He knows that he actually had people moving on with him. And he has promised none other than Musalia Mudavadi, Wetangula seats, and that is the starting point. Of course, that's why in the next few days, in fact, by Thursday, and Friday, we should be seeing now a lot of lobbying in terms of this reward mechanism, but in terms of once the Senate is resumes on Thursday, the speakership is an issue. National Assembly speakership, it's a reward aspect which must still be there. And I'm seeing someone like Susan Kiik has already appointed her chief of staff, who was very instrumental in Dr. Ruto's campaigns. So that reward will still be there. All we need, and I think, is a balancing act, because of course these are politicians and you do not expect them not to recognize who has sweated with them to achieve what they have achieved. But in terms of the aspect, you must balance properly where a politician can fit in terms of this particular opportunity. But in terms where we want purely professional services, then there must be purely professional people at that particular stage.
You know, you said something that as Senate resumes. Are you sure it's resuming, or it's, what is the word?
It is not resuming. Of the Senate is the government is continuous. That's the word. It's only that you will be told this is the 9th Parliament, 10th Parliament, 13th Parliament, but it is still Parliament. So it's not resuming. Of course, it is being convened now properly, formally.
Okay.
And just like these others, it's a new house altogether. But in terms of functionality, constitutional aspects, their duty remains the same.
Right, and of course their first order of business would be to swear them in, after which they will be electing who will be their speaker. That is for both the National Assembly and the Senate. And I would imagine that that is the same thing that will happen to the county assemblies across the country. And Suba, when you reflect on these politicians that have been working with the Deputy President, I'm just going to name a few. Justin Muturi, of course, has been Speaker. Musalia Mudavadi was promised Chief, or is it Prime CS position. There is Governor Amason Kingi, and there is also Governor Alfred Mutua, and so many other political leaders, some that lost elections, some that didn't contest any. What is your view about the success stories of political CSs, or CSs or politicians, versus technocrats who become CSs?
Yeah, one, you know, the question is based on the assumption that politicians are not professionals. If my friend here, Okach, joined politics, he's a professional, he's not right. So is my colleague here. We have in Parliament, or people who have been in politics, very seasoned lawyers. We have engineers in Parliament. We have all manner of cadres of people that are professionals in their own right. But of course, there's a sense in which engaging in politics reduces somebody's impartiality. We have it on record during the one-party era, and even post one-party era, when, you know, members of Parliament doubled as ministers. Of course, one of the things that the regimes that have been established after the 2010 Constitution have said is that those that are purely technocrats tend not to be savvy in terms of relating with the people and explaining and expounding government policy. And so that is why every time there are appointments, we'll always see somebody who has been served actively in politics, in elective positions. And so we expect that even in the appointments that His Excellency William Ruto will be making immediately after his swearing in next week, don't be surprised to see people who have been in politics. And of course, we have already seen that he has assured, you know, Musalia Mudavadi that, you know, he will go by the pledge that he made. Of course, there were certain conditions. I do not think those conditions need to apply because they were arbitrarily set, and therefore, the important thing is that the team has won. And so, you know, he was promised, you know, chief cabinet secretary and so on and so forth. And even among these other leaders, and even those that are coming on board after the conclusion of the elections, Abdi Roba, the immediate former governor of Mandera and now senator, they may not themselves be appointed to the cabinet, but I think the expectation is that they'll front certain people with the skills that are required to occupy those positions. I remember even Alfred Mutua, when he was asked, what is in it for you? And it leaked out that, you know, he was promised that there'll be one cabinet position and so on and so forth. Even Sonko. And so Sonko may not be in a position to occupy a public office as at now, because I think his removal as governor was based on Chapter 6. And therefore, there's a sense in which, as things stand now, and the lawyers in the room will correct me, I think he stands debarred until stated otherwise from occupying public office. But what leaked out, and he was not good at keeping the secret, is that he was also given certain promises, you know, parastatal appointment and so on and so forth. And so it is not that he himself will be the one occupying those positions, but his party or his sphere of influence, whatever it is, will be proposing certain individuals to occupy those positions.
Suba, did he leak a secret, or he was positioning himself?
He of course, he's not very good at keeping secrets, and so...
Let's not get to that, knowing that he's not here. But anyway, Governor Alfred Mutua is on record. It was actually on the issue that he communicated what the agreement had been at Kenya Kwanza. But Tom, so now as we move on to the next level, I mean, and I'm asking this to each of you because we have those experts or technical people that came in to become CSs, talking about Fred Matiang'i, talking about Amina Mohamed, and the list is long, including Farida Karunei, who was a journalist, maybe still is, versus Kazungu Kambi, Charity Ngilu, Najib Balala, Mwangi Kiunjuri, Eugene Wamalwa, who are politicians. When you look at their performance in the dockets they've been by themselves, but also the dockets they've headed, how does that compare? And is there any reasonable difference? If you look at that, including, I think C.S. Macharia came from the banking sector into health, into roads and transport.
So I think there is a difference in terms of the operations of a politician and operations of a professional in their area of sphere. One, we know, as Duncan said, politicians tend to continuously be in support of the side that allowed them a position which may sometimes blur their wholesome view of things. But these professionals who are in their areas of operations, they will tend to perform their duty because their inclination is more to the professionalism than to the party that brought them on board. So I think there is a difference, of course. There is a difference in terms of executions of the mandate. Of course, we can't forget that a delivery of a judge of a government is a delivery of a political promise, which in essence, even politicians themselves are part of the political promise that was given to the Kenyans. So it will be a delicate balance for the government in force to ensure that as much as they are bringing on board the professionals to execute their mandates, they are also not forgetting their political buddies who allowed them or who were with them in achieving that dream. So of course, I agree there is a difference, but then that difference should not be overlooked over the delivery of the political promise. Of course, there is a dichotomy between law and politics. The performance of executive, being an arm of the government, is a political body that ought to implement the law. So as much as we are talking about the professionals being in the cabinet secretary positions, still it is a delivery of the political promise. So you can't really leave out all the politicians in the delivery of the services. You need to incorporate in a good way that does not defeat the essences to the promises that were made to the people of Kenya.
Okay, all right. And I want us to listen to President-elect William Ruto on what he said about what should define his relationship with, what is the word? Raila Odinga's party.
I will also be putting a call to my worthy competitors, beginning with Raila Odinga, my worthy competitor, with his Azimio team, so that we can begin to contextualize how we are going to work together for the people of Kenya. Those of us who will be working from the executive, and the Azimio team who will be working from the opposition. And as I committed to the people of Kenya, I believe in the rule of law. I do not believe in the handshake stories. I believe in an accountable government.
Okay, that he believes in an accountable government. Dan, in 2013, we were at a place such as this, that Raila Odinga had lost the election. The Supreme Court had upheld the election of Uhuru Kenyatta. But then starting the years of 2014, or is it 2015, there was the movement of the National Dialogue by Sabasaba of that year, never materialized. Then it became a clarion call against the IEBC. It was such a chaotic opposition versus government political season. Come 2017 to 2022, it was the story of the handshake, starting March 2018. Up until now, which again has defined the politics into the 2022 election. What is this that William Ruto must do to get it right politically? Because obviously there has to be political activity in the coming 5 years. So what is his responsibility in managing the politics of the country?
Yes, of course, being an incumbent is always an advantage to any person who is contesting, you know, for re-election. And because you've had the chance to demonstrate to the people in terms of fulfillment of your policies and your promises, and seeking a second chance for them to give you another chance, maybe to finish up in terms of what you've not finished, or even additional promises. So it's always been an advantage. So at this point, that alone will be an advantage, but more importantly, how he manages to keep the country together, how he manages to reach out to the perceived areas which did not support him, so that in the future, these areas will feel part and parcel of his regime. That will define the political success of his story. More importantly, he has told and promised people that there is the bottom-up approach, where the common mwananchi, the focus will be more on that common mwananchi going up. So, of course, every person, all those people who call themselves they are from mashinani, or the people on the ground, they want to feel that our status economically has changed. That will be the most, will tap into the most basic aspects in terms of a scale. That is the price of unga, the economic situation of the country, the debt issues of the country, and the affordability of living in this country in terms of inflation and so on. Those are the key issues which a common person will compare and say, during these administrations, my life has become better, or my life has remained the same, or has become worse. But ideally, in terms of the political aspects, of course, there are things like he has promised, and this is the time that Kenyans should really read the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza, because that is actually the scale upon which we will judge this particular government and help us to keep it in toes, because that's where the contract, the social contract that this administration that is coming in is signing with us, the Mwananchi. And they have given us pledges that he will ensure that the judges who had not been sworn in will immediately be sworn in into office. We'll want to see that. Here they say they'll take a stock of all court decisions, and they'll ensure that they are respected and implemented, which will be a very key issue, because this particular administration will still require aggressive persons like Suba Churchill and the civil society, so that where, you know, power corrupts absolutely. So we ensure that, of course, and I'm happy the president-elect is very open to this and says, keep us in check. So, of course, we'll need the courts to keep them in check, or to give guidance where maybe there may be errors here and there. And so respect of court orders is very, very key and it will send a very good message to anyone who will be part of that administration. But in terms of politics, of course, I always say there are positions for politicians. In terms of government, we always say government is very big. Positions are there. There are places you can send them to ambassadorial, you give them ambassadorial positions, they go and try to see whether they can politic outside there, they will not. Give them these issues of speakership, which is cutting across.
Yield results for the country?
They don't yield results, but you know, there is no major result in terms of that you expect in terms of ambassadorial positions. It is just to ensure there is cordial relationship. That's all. You don't need someone who will just don't know how to speak. That's the issue. But there is no yardstick. Some I will tell you, have you ever had any data here or statistical data telling us this is the ambassador who has performed so well for the country, brought in this? It is never there. So those positions are there and they are always put there. My worry is when they are recycled into parastatals, which have a direct delivery link to the common mananchi in terms of services. That's where we have been going wrong. When we send them to parastatals and think they can just go there and sit there, it affects delivery of services and even delivery of promises. I would have an issue with that, and I hope we won't go that way.
Dan, I notice how you have evolved my question. It was exactly on management of politics, but anyway, it went into many things. For you, Suba, I mean, coming from a season where the president and the deputy president were at loggerheads across the entire term, maybe 3 years or 4 years, I'm looking at the numbers. The counties of Uasin Gishu, Elgeyo Marakwet, Nandi, Kericho, Bomet, and Baringo gave William Ruto 1.2 million votes combined. The counties of Meru, Tharaka Nithi, Embu, Kirinyaga, Murang'a, Kiambu, Nyandarua, and Nyeri, 8 counties, gave William Ruto 2.4 million votes. That's double what the backyard of William Ruto gave him. What power does that grant Ruto's deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, and how do they manage their relations to the extent that there are no threats? We don't get back to a situation like we did in the second term of Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yeah, I think that will be the determining factor in the relationship between the two top gentlemen moving forward. We have already seen a bit of, staking of claims. I think I spotted it in the newspaper last week that, the Mount Kenya, as we politically call it, expect 50% of government appointments, and of course I'm sure they are basing it on the fact that they delivered the most votes, and this is politics that did not just start yesterday. You remember even in the differences between the outgoing president and the incoming president, there have been these banters as to if you say you made me president, how many votes did you bring on the table? And it's politics that has been there. And so we expect that, and of course the incoming president has said that he will not treat or subject his deputy to the kind of treatment or mistreatment that he has gone through for the last 5 or so years. And so we expect that there'll be that jostling. And I think part of that claim of 50% was based on these Johnny-come-latelys that are now hovering around like vultures when the prey is down. Because, naturally, if you fight for a prey, if you go hunting, and traditionally, if you went hunting and killed a prey, the fox, our forefathers had a way of saying, this part of the animal belongs to the person who spotted it. This part belongs to the person who speared it. And that is the expectation with government. I mean, we behave particularly in the same way, typically in the same way. Those of us who are addicted to watching National Geographic, when we see politicians in their real action, we actually see those animals in the National Geographic. And so we expect that there'll be that jostling and so on and so forth. But moving forward, I think the president will have to be very, very adept at managing relations, because those are tensions that can clearly, slip off within the cleavages that we can clearly see. And so we hope that he will learn from the experience that he has gathered. 10 years experience as deputy president is not a small period of time. And of course, basing on, his aspirations moving forward, I'm sure he would want to have another taste of the cherry in 2027. And so how he manages this will determine whether he will be struggling like the late President Kibaki did. We remember Kenyans singing Yote Yawezekana Bila Moi, only for Kibaki to literally scrap through in 5 years later, which election was, raised a lot of issues, post-election violence. I do not think that the president-elect wants to go that path.
Okay.
And so how he manages those, very, very, sensitive and ethnically laced, relations will determine how we move forward as a country. Of course, at the moment, there's a lot of excitement, but as appointments begin to happen next week, you'll be seeing, mamas here, mamas there, and of course, the Western Bloc also will say, we have, 2 of our sons here who delivered. There is, of course, now a bit of competition between Moses Wetangula and Musalia Mudavadi as to who delivered. If Moses Wetangula becomes the speaker, he will, of course, with the third senior most, after the president and the deputy, that constitutionally, in the event of a vacancy or inability to deliver, from the president and the deputy, it's the Speaker of the National Assembly that acts for a certain number of days. And he has already said as much. And so those tensions will also go down to play. There'll be an interplay of those tensions even at the sub-regional levels. And so we expect that, there'll be that delicate balance. And of course, in a country where, the second, what the president-elect calls, his worthy competitor, got, almost, the same number of votes as he did, and they are out there, both the Azimio presidential candidate and his running mate, are very critical politicians. You can imagine how the pair will relate with the establishment. Okay. You remember all these things about the botched BBI politics. I will not be surprised if it crops up. And the people, the Azimio people think this is now what we can help Kenyans to deliver as in the next 5 years or so.
Okay, and of course, in my calculation of the 8 counties of Mount Kenya, I left out Nakuru and Laikipia, and it was deliberate. But if you had to put them alongside that, then it comes to about 3 million votes. And Raila Odinga got 848,205 votes in the 10 counties of Mount Kenya, inclusive of Laikipia and Nakuru. Paul, so then, as we focus on this, what would you want to see? Because as the tussle between the president and the deputy was happening in this term, so was the rule of law suffering to the extent that it became one of the campaign issues. Like Dan says that William Ruto actually made promises on the rule of law, on the judiciary. So how then do these 2 gentlemen, William Ruto, Rigathi Gachagua, and their team, manage the country to ensure that we don't find ourselves in such a situation? And how do they deal with their conflicts, if at all?
One of the things that I would wish to see, it is upholding of the rule of law. The rule of law starts with the fidelity to the Constitution, and also respect to the constitutional institutions, because they are there. We have the DCI, we have the DPP, we have the judiciary. I would wish to see non-interference by the political actors in terms of the operations of the independent constitutional positions. 3, I wish to see strengthened constitutional institutions in terms of the physical aspect of it, being the monetary aspect, and also the personnel. Strengthen institutions ensure that democracy thrives. If, for example, there is a promise that he is going to increase the judiciary fund and also the police service, they are going to have a separate kitty to ensure their operations. Those are some of the things that will allow the institutions not to over-rely on the political brigade for them to perform their duties. So if it is possible. And what Kenyans look forward to is that the institutions that are there, that are set out by the constitutions, will be respected, one, and will be allowed to exist independently. One of the institutions that, of course, we expect to act independently is the parliament. We do not expect much of the political interference with the operations or with the performance of the legislative aspect of the parliament. So what we look forward is to...
What gives you that confidence?
Of course, with the numbers of what we are expecting in the parliament, the members of the parliament are to offer checks and balances to what the government of the day is proposing. If we have enough numbers to challenge any law or any move that goes against the people of Kenya, then we have enough muscles to wage a war against that what seems good to the government but is not good to the people of Kenya. Of course, we understand, if we look back to the proposition of the BBI, of course, it was a political vehicle to ensure that leaders from one aspect of one regime are able to transit to the other regime. But the totality of it, was there a process that was fair and full scrutiny to the provisions of the Constitution? Of course, when we have strengthened institutions in terms of their operations, in terms of their financial aspect, it is very easy for us to achieve the rule of law, and it is very easy for us to have a democratic state where every voice will be heard. We don't have to speak in one voice, but whichever voice we speak with, let your voice be heard and be acknowledged and be respected. That is what we are expecting.
Okay. Very interesting that you should say that. William Ruto has been very keen on building alliances with the independents, some parties that have shifted allegiance from Azimio la Umoja. So I don't know how the 13th Parliament will be in the relationship with the executive. I want us to look at some messages that have been coming from different parts of the world, and this specifically from the United States. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who has written a message of congratulations to the President-elect William Ruto. It's pretty confusing. The United States congratulates William Ruto on his election as President of Kenya, as confirmed by the Supreme Court on September 5. We also congratulate the people of Kenya on the conclusion of a peaceful electoral process. We commend Raila Odinga and other candidates for abiding by the Supreme Court ruling and transparent electoral processes and the peaceful adjudication of disputes are testament to the strength of democratic institutions. The United States and Kenya share a strong and long-standing partnership based on commitment to democracy, security, and economic prosperity. We look forward to enhancing this partnership with President Ruto and his new government. Obviously, that is something that is expected to happen in the coming weeks after the swearing in tomorrow, and that is on the composition of a new government. Kenya Mushoki on Twitter is telling us that President-elect rebelled from inside the system, which is much more powerful than rebelling outside the system. Anthony Kanye is saying what matters is how the President-elect will demonstrate going forward that the winner does not take it all, including how the ministries will be shared out to the opposition side and development across the country. Well, he's said that the opposition will be in the opposition, the government will be in the government. Engineer Lazaro, you're saying that I think President-elect should now be accorded full sovereignty to implement his campaign pledges. He shouldn't come up with any excuse. I'm just wondering, does he have sovereignty, or the sovereignty?
Sovereignty vests with the people, you know.
Yeah, it's with the people according to the Constitution. Now, Bob Otieno Owino, you're saying, kudos to ABC Chair Wafula Chebukati for conducting elections according to former CJ Maraga's ruling in 2017, which led to credible, verifiable, I think you mean verifiable, transparent, free and fair elections against all odds, more so a peaceful one. And Okelo Mwalimu, now that 2022 electoral cycle is over, Kenyans must accept the leaders that we've got and allow our beloved motherland to move forward. We must pray and hope that William Ruto, being the anointed one, will serve all regions equally. And I believe that's the prayer of every Kenyan. at this point in time. Now, the ABC may be facing the challenges they are, but remember that we are due for review of boundaries, that is for the constituencies, the 291s, and also I believe the wards. That must be done before 2024, being the cap of the 12 years since the last review, which was concluded in 2012. So who will be doing that? Of course, this is a conversation that continues. Thank you, gentlemen. Paul Macharia, Dan Okach, and Suba Churchill for making time for us of this conversation. And it continues up until we have a new government in place, so that the work of checking their performance, enhancing accountability continues, especially from this side of life. My name is Sam Gituku. See you some other time. Bye for now.